On the Restless Beauty of the Ocean by John O'Donohue. The words sea and ocean are too small to image such wild divinity. The ocean is beyond language. The flow of the ocean presents a most beautiful dance. She is eternally restless and delights the eye most with the structured rhythm of waves. The seashore is a fascinating threshold. With sublime elegance, the ocean approaches and embraces the landscape, and each wave has a unique grace and rhythm. The grandeur of ocean movement is consistently enthralling, yet there is consolation and consistency in the faithfulness of the ocean. Water stirs something very deep and ancient in the human heart. It satisfies us in a more intimate way than the other elements. Our eyes and hearts follow its rhythm as if the flow of water were the mirror where time becomes obliquely visible. The image of water can hold such longing. The faraway force of the moon that draws the tides to dance is a vivid metaphor for the passionate kinship of the elements that stirs across infinite distance. Unlike the land, which is fixed in one place, the sea manifests freedom. She is the primal dance, a dance that has always moved to its own music. The wild divinity of the ocean infuses the shore with ancient sound. This is a primal conversation. Welcome, and thank you for leaning in to this latest floating poetry broadcast, the 49th in my ongoing weekly series, coming to you live by the star-bright ocean from Watch Hill, Rhode Island. The last of broadcasts for now from Watch Hill, Rhode Island. That will be elsewhere in Rhode Island come next week and beyond. This is your poet and poetorialist Colin Goedecke, a voice for living our days more poetically, more expressively, more soulfully. Inviting you, each of you, this week to drink in the beauty, harmonies, and mysteries of the sea, the wonder and timeless wisdom of the oceans flowing near or far around our lands and lives. And the salty body of water, currents of energy, depths and shallows of being, waves and swells that we are each made of. Now and throughout my own life, as some of you know, being by the ocean has always brought me more wildly alive, and as an artist, as a poet, has been a source of constant inspiration, a full and joyful immersion of spirit, of all my inner and outer senses. I've even taken 3 ocean walks, a triptych of ocean walks today in different parts of where I am, and even grown some sea captain's whiskers as well to get more in the spirit. So, let's swim together into some of these rich and enriching waters through cultural commentary, poetry, thoughts, and inquiries I've curated for us. Well, this idea that John O'Donohue, and by the way, that was from his book Beauty, The Invisible Embrace. That was one of the chapters. This idea that he speaks of and others do, of a conversation of land and sea, of elements, I find very meaningful, and you might want to ponder that if you haven't already, and we can extend it to many other dimensions. Well, some Augusts back, I wrote a poem toward that notion around an artist friend's painting. His name is Adam Van Doren, a New Yorker, and this was a painting of his called Seashore, a beautiful painting from Martha's Vineyard that he had painted in 2012. I wrote this some August back, years after he had done that, but I was at a show of his, and taking that in, this poem came into me. Cliff dwelling. Ragged and soft at the same time, the rising cliffs, the in-roving ocean, in slow motion, converging, conversing, needing nothing else but the company of the sky, clouds, sand, each other. Well, for all of us who've experienced the sea or lived by the sea or travel there, the sea is an endless theater, ever-changing show of light and shape and color, and especially of water and light. This was a poem from Punta Bete in the Yucatan in winter some years back. While I was looking at the early sun-rising ocean, this is called de madrugada, early in the morning. A stripe of zinc oxide over indigo. Let's hear from D.H. Lawrence, who in 1915, in the summer of 1915, he was at the English seaside resort of Littlehampton, and he was contemplating the relationship between the increasingly artificial human world, even then, and the immutable authenticity of the natural world in a letter to his friend Lady Cynthia Asquith, and this was from a collection of his letters. We have lived a few days on the seashore, with the wave banging up at us. Also, over the river beyond the ferry, there is a flat silvery world, as in the beginning, untouched, with pale sand and very much white foam, row after row, coming from under the sky in the silver evening. And no people at all, no houses, no buildings, only a haystack on the edge of the shingle and an old black mill. For the rest, the flat, unfinished world running with foam and noise and silvery light, and a few gulls swinging like a half-born thought. It is a great thing to realize that the original world is still there, perfectly clean and pure. Thank you, D.H. Lawrence. And then Anne Morrow Lindbergh, who wrote a lovely book called Gift from the Sea. Back in time, she was the wife of Charles Lindbergh. This is a quote from her, from that book. The sea does not reward those who are too anxious, too greedy, or too impatient. To dig for treasure shows not only impatience and greed, but lack of faith. Patience, patience, patience is what the sea teaches. Patience and faith. One should lie empty, open, choiceless as a beach, waiting for a gift from the sea. Well, yes, there is wildness to be found by the ocean, and also much peacefulness and patience. And this is from a very special place to me by the sea for many years, in Egypt Beach out on the South Fork of Long Island, where I spent much time and many musings and all kinds of poetry. And this is called Early Autumn Oceanside from that beach. The sole silhouette of a man, silent, motionless, before a brilliantined expanse of running ocean, a low-flying gull, a slow-passing boat on the near horizon, ribbons and threads of clouds tiered with pale blue, then deeper blue sky, laces of water music, caresses of cool sea wind, warm sand on the skin, serenity. Well, the ocean can also be a place where many things meet, meaning what I'm thinking of is natural elements, or the outer nature, and ourselves, our natures, both physical and interior natures. And this was a poem from Kittery, Maine, a few late springs back. It's called Point of Convergence. It was written on Sea Point Beach near Jerish Island, if anybody knows where that is. Some of you do, actually, some of the Mainers that are listening. Point of convergence of pine green land, of ash-gray sand studded with bleached oyster shells, wave-washed stones, of clear cold sea, of a slow-moving scrim of salt-white mist soft over the surfaces, echoing a low tide of blue-bordered clouds, floating man, poet, coming together on a solitary, salutary Maine coast morning. The poet Kathleen Jamie, from her lovely collection Waterlight, wrote this resonant poem called Crossing the Loch, Scotland. Remember how we rowed toward the cottage on the sickle-shaped bay, That one night after the pub loosed us through its swinging doors and we pushed across the shingle till water lipped the sides as though the lock-mouthed boat. I forget who rowed. Our jokes hushed. The oars splash, creak, and the spill of the lock reached long into the night. Out in the race I was scared, the cold shawl of breeze and hunched hills, what the water held of deadheads, ticking nuclear hulls. Who rowed and who kept their peace? Who hauled salt air and stars deep into their lungs were not reassured, and who first noticed the lock's phosphorescence, so like a twittering nest washed from the rushes, an astonished small boat of saints, we watched water shine on our fingers and oars, the magic dart of our bow wave. It was surely foolhardy, such a broad lock a tide, but we live and even have children to women and men we had yet to meet. That night we set out, calling our own the sky and salt water, wounded hills dark-starred by blaeberries, the glimmering anklets we wore in the shallows as we shipped oars and jumped to draw the boat safe, high at the cottage shore. Well, as a beachcomber, there's all sorts of wonderful things that even today I found, at least that were treasures to me, and all kinds of treasures lie there, and soundings. And this is called The Beach is Strewn with Shells. The beach is strewn with shells, holding the music of blue-white swells. Well, this notion of music led me to think more on what I'll call sea music, water music, and experiences I've had in the Aegean, in the Cyclades, and here on an ancient Greek island called Kea. And this was at an old ruined temple on the ocean. This is called Music Among the Ruins. A solo flute floats upwind into our ears with the sound of waves smoothing over stones on the shore, with rushes of sea wind through the sun-baked, time-baked ruins, with the imagined voices of mythic gods and deep blue siren songs. I'm having a sip of water. I would say we do salt water, but not tonight, even though I'm feeling salty. Walt Whitman has one poem in particular that I felt you all might like to hear. It's called The World Below the Brine. The world below the brine. Forests at the bottom of the sea, the branches and leaves, sea lettuce, vast lichens, strange flowers and seeds, the thick tangle, openings and pink turf, different colors, pale gray and green, purple, white and gold, the play of light through the water. Dumb swimmers there among the rocks, coral, gluten, grass, rushes, and the aliment of the swimmers. Sluggish existences grazing there, suspended or slowly crawling close to the bottom. The sperm whale at the surface blowing air and spray, or disporting with his flukes. The leaden-eyed shark, the walrus, the turtle, the hairy sea leopard, and the stingray. Passions there, wars, pursuits, tribes, sight in those ocean depths, breathing that thick-breathing air as so many do. The change thence to the sight here, and to the subtle air breathed by beings like us who walk this sphere. The change onward from ours to that of beings who walk other spheres. So as he mentions the sperm whale, all the remarkable creatures of the seas all over the world, small and large. And Victoria Scheffer wrote The Year of the Whale, lovely illustrated serenade to one of the planet's most precious creatures, the whale. And I just wanted to share this bit of a quote from that. Moving through a dim, dark, cool, watery world of its own, the whale is timeless and ancient, part of our common heritage, and yet remote, awful, prowling the ocean floor a half-mile down, under the guidance of powers and senses we are only beginning to grasp. The Year of the Whale. Oh, a good read. and good illustrations. Well, I too have written of the whale, and more than once, but especially from indelible experiences I had very up close. I can tell you many stories offline about that or another time. In Alaska during a floating wilderness journey there, and humpback whales were ever present. And I had many musings on them. This is one poem, Carriers of Light. They swam inside the collars of stiff-shirted men, the skirts and corsets of well-contained ladies, the silk folds of tightly rolled umbrellas, were worn round bodies and held over heads through rain, sun, seasons, the bones of mighty-to-behold creatures, and all their sacred oil that flamed street lamps for carriages and coachmen, lit night lamps for readers, for lovers, fed ticking clocks on tall mantles, essential fuel, rare as the milk of queens, spilled wantonly, unwantedly, from the ancient rovers of the oceans, from unfathomably many innocent carriers of light, life, song, for the whales. David White's poem, I had read one other time, some programs back, but deserves a place, I think, in our inquiry and discovery here. Song for the Salmon. For too many days now I have not written of the sea, nor the rivers, nor the shifting currents we find between the islands. For too many nights now I have not imagined the salmon threading the dark streams of reflected stars, nor have I dreamt of his longing, nor the lithe swing of his tail toward dawn. I have not given myself to the depth to which he goes, to the cargoes of crystal water cold with salt, nor the enormous plains of ocean swaying beneath the moon. I have not felt the lifted arms of the ocean opening its white hands on the seashore, nor the salted wind, whole and healthy, filling the chest with living air. I have not heard those waves fallen out of heaven unto earth, nor the tumult of sound and the satisfaction of 1,000 miles of ocean giving up its strength on the sand. But now I have spoken of that great sea. The ocean of longing shifts through me. The blessed inner star of navigation moves in the dark sky above, and I am ready, like the young salmon, to leave his river, blessed with hunger for a great journey on the drawing tide. Thank you, David White. One of my great favorite poets, and that poem. Well, Mark Nepo, in his book of Awakening, also kind of, I think, a must-read and a must-have. It's a day-by-day book, meaning by date, by the day of the year. Always good reflections. And in this particular one, I had to go diving back for it, was about the chambered nautilus and the metaphor of that, the chambered nautilus. He says, our ability to find something to love and to love again for the first time depends greatly on how we resolve and integrate where we've been before. A great model for us exists in the chambered nautilus, an exquisite shelled creature that lives along the ocean floor. The nautilus is a deep-sea form of life that inches like a soft man in a hard shell, finding his prayers along the bottom. Over time it builds a spiral shell, but always lives in the newest chamber. The other chambers, they say, contain a gas or liquid that helps the nautilus control its buoyancy. Even here, a mute lesson in how to use the past. Live in the most recent chamber and use the others to stay afloat. Can we, in this way, build strong chambers for our traumas? Not living there, but breaking our past down till it is fluid enough to lose most of its weight? Can we internalize where we've been enough to know that we are no longer living there? When we can, life will seem lighter. It is not by accident that the nautilus turns its slow digestion of the bottom into a body that can float. It tells us that only time can put the past in perspective, and only when the past is behind us and not before us can we be open enough and empty enough to truly feel what is about to happen. Only by living in the freshest chamber of the heart can we love again and again for the first time. Thank you, Mark Nepo. Well, if you love to read or revisit some great books about the sea, wrapped around the sea, here are some that I would choose. Ernest Hemingway, The Old Man and the Sea. I would definitely read Rachel Carson's book, The Sea Around Us, which is about the geologic and biological processes that make the sea mysterious and awe-inspiring. It has, yes, scientific facts, but it's got so much lyricism. So it's a very published. She brought a strong literary aesthetic to science and became one of the most celebrated science writers of her time. And in that book she wrote, "Who has known the ocean? Neither you nor I, with our earthbound senses, know the foam and surge of the tide that beats over the crab hiding under the seaweed of his tide pool home, or the lilt of the long, slow swells of mid-ocean, where shoals of wandering fish prey and are preyed upon, and the dolphin breaks the waves to breathe the upper atmosphere. Nor can we know the vicissitudes of life on the ocean floor, where sunlight, filtering through 100 feet of water, makes but a fleeting bluish twilight, in which dwell sponge and mollusk and starfish and coral, where swarms of diminutive fish twinkle through the dusk like a silver rain of meteors, and eels lie in wait among the rocks. Even less it is given to man to descend those 6 incomprehensible miles into the recesses of the abyss, where reign utter silence and unvarying cold and eternal night. To sense this world of waters known to the creatures of the sea, we must shed our human perceptions of length and breadth and time and place, and enter vicariously into a universe of all-pervading water. The ocean is a place of paradoxes. It is the home of the great white shark, 2,000-pound killer of the seas, and of the 100-foot blue whale, the largest animal ever lived. It is also the home of living things so small that your 2 hands may scoop up as many of them as there are stars in the Milky Way. And it is becoming of the flowering of astronomical numbers of these diminutive plants known as diatoms that the surface waters of the ocean are in reality boundless pastures. Every marine animal, from the smallest to the sharks and whales, is ultimately dependent for its food upon these microscopic entities of the vegetable life of the ocean. Within their fragile walls, the sea performs a vital alchemy that utilizes the sterile chemical elements dissolved in the water and welds them with the torch of sunlight into the stuff of life. Rachel Carson, Undersea. Jacques Cousteau's book, The Great Undersea Explorer, where he swims alone among fishes and enormous rocks. It's a memoir, The Silent World, Jacques Cousteau. Moby Dick, of course, by Melville, a masterpiece. The film is also quite something in its way with Gregory Peck. Definitely suggest that one. And here's a quote from Moby Dick, which is also, the other title was Moby Dick or The Whale. The sea had jeeringly kept his finite body up, but drowned the infinite of his soul. Not drowned entirely, though. Rather carried down alive to wondrous depths where strange shapes of the unwarped primal world glided to and fro before his passive eyes, and the miser merman Wisdom revealed his hoarded heaps, and among the joyous, heartless, ever-juvenile eternities, Pip saw the multitudinous, God-omnipresent coral insects that out of the firmament of waters heaved the colossal orbs. He saw God's foot upon the treadle of the loom and spoke it, and therefore his shipmates called him mad. So man's insanity is heaven's sense, and wandering from all mortal reason, man comes at last to that celestial thought, which to reason is absurd and frantic, and weal or woe feels them uncompromised, indifferent as his God. Another book, very interesting, more contemporary, by James Nestor, Deep. Simply Deep, which is an ode to the extreme sport of free diving and human potential. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, the great Jules Verne adventure story, a classic that chronicles the adventures of Captain Nemo, all about the freedom of the ocean and the wonder of human ingenuity. And in that, the mercurial Jules Verne writes, "The sea is everything. It covers 7/10 of the terrestrial globe. Its breath is pure and life-giving. It is an immense desert place where man is never lonely, for he senses the weaving of creation on every hand. It is the physical embodiment of a supernatural existence, for the sea is itself nothing but love and emotion. It is the living infinite. As one of your poets has said, nature manifests herself in it with her three kingdoms, mineral, vegetable, and animal. The ocean is the vast reservoir of nature. Well, I was inspired by him. I have been for a long time, and one time in Mexico on the coast, on the Mayan coast, in the middle of the night, there was this wild storm, and the little place I was staying was right on the water. And this poem came called Tempestad, Tempest. Our Jules Verne flying ship slips its moorings in the night, and we awake to find ourselves sailing in a great and thunderous gale of wind that blows across our deck and whistles around our open windows. We fly out under known and unknown constellations, under the wagging dog star, under the swirl of Venus, under Orion's shiny belt, and out into the midst of the black ocean, where there's nary a soul, not even a lantern fish to light the way down below. We hold fast to the railing of our deck, and each other are held fast by the fancy of our flight. Cy Montgomery, some of you know about this, The Soul of an Octopus, part memoir, part ode to the octopus. Absolutely fascinating. Aquagenesis by Richard Ellis. Essentially an encyclopedic illustrated book of ocean life, over 3 billion years of aquatic evolution and all its mystery and beauty. The Secret Life of Lobsters is one of just the other. There are many more, but I'll just giving you a few that are interesting to me, which is an intimate portrait of lobster and the people who fish for them in the Gulf of Maine. We had, of course, to mention the Odyssey, Homer's epic, and where so much happens, right, around the sea, in the sea, from omens to sirens. Tell me, it says, about a complicated man. Muse, tell me how he wandered and was lost when he had wrecked the holy town of Troy, and where he went and who he met, the pain he suffered in the storms at sea, and how he worked to save his life and bring his men back home. He failed to keep them safe. Poor fools, they ate the sun god's cattle, and the god kept them from home. Now, goddess, child of Zeus, tell the old story for our modern times. Find the beginning. All right, just a moment for water. Well, on the angle of Odysseys, and relative to our own lives at times, this poem for you, for us, our Odysseys. No fingerprints of any two Odysseus's alike. Each of us with our own epic to live and tell, our own Ithacas to seek, to journey to, our own wanderings and concealments, friendships and testings, omens, demons, passions, questions to contend with along the wild, unknown way, touched at times by the graces, sometimes caprices, of greater and lesser gods, of the singular lands and seas we wind up traveling, traversing. All the joyful and painful passages, encounters, vantages, offering each of us one-of-a-kind chances and choices, egoic to heroic, to see, to take, to make at every turn. Our Odysseys. While also considering the gods, small g, as I do, of all kinds, God of the winds, gods of the seas, and more, even the weather gods, is this poem from that Egypt Beach I read you that piece from East Hampton. It's called The Sea Gods. I was having a reverie one day, and I was imagining if a sea god came out of the sea at that moment, what would they look like? The sea gods. The teeth of the sea gods are oyster white, their eyes mussel blue, and over their nipples they wear sun-bleached scallop shells or starfish, and around their salty, warm waists a loincloth of shining, wet sea grape leaves. Sea gods. Well, since we're speaking of myth and mythic things at the moment, Greg Lavoie, of the book Callings, speaks about them, and I wanted to bring this in because I think this might be interesting to everybody. Myth involves stories that are not factual, but that are true. They aren't literally true, but they are psychologically true. They didn't really happen, but they're happening all the time. Myths are the stories we create to help explain ourselves to ourselves. In fact, says J.F. Bierlein in Parallel Myths, myth is the ancestor of science. It's our first fumbling attempt to explain how things happen. It is also the forebear of philosophy and religion in that it tries to explain why things happen. It's also the earliest form of literature, preceding recorded history by thousands of years. They're metaphors, analogies, stories that get at the heart of human behavior, at profound truths, universal themes, ageless patterns. They are perhaps above all stories of transformation, from chaos to form, sleep to awakening, woundedness to wholeness, folly to wisdom, from being lost to finding our way. They describe the stages of life, the initiations we all go through as we move from one level to another, child to adult, young to old, single to married, cowardly to courageous, life to death, death to life. The Odyssey, for example, isn't just Ulysses' story. It, like dreams and symptoms, it also suggests cures, clues, directions, solutions. Each of us is living out a myth whenever we are brought down by something. When we're undone, for example, by our own anger, as Ahab was, in Moby Dick, or when we run from a calling, Jonah. And, of course, that story about Jonah and the whale. In our contemporary reenactments, the battlefields can be quite prosaic. They don't take place on the islands of the Aegean, and they don't pit the hero or heroine against dragons or cyclops. Instead, they take place in our homes and offices, and in our relationships to our loved ones, our careers, our rebellious teenagers, and our health. The outcomes are capable of making or breaking us as surely as did the trials of Ulysses. The noted dancer back in time, Isadora Duncan, some of you may know about her. She said, "I was born by the sea. My first idea of movement of the dance certainly came from the rhythm of the waves." Well, there are people that we know are wildly passionate about, certainly beyond me and through all time, about the seas, the ocean, everything around the ocean. And there's a fellow that I know out in the Pacific Northwest. His name is Tim Gervin. And a couple of years back, he loves to go out and brave the wildest, coldest water out there, and sends me, time to time, amazing photographs, I guess, from a GoPro. I'm not quite sure how he's taking them while he's doing all that, but he's one of those intrepids who brave the ocean at its wildest, and I wrote this for him. It's called Wild Watering. You, braver of the wildest waters, fiercely embracing waters, venturer in bare and second shadow skin into the arms of the deep and darker mysteries, siren-sung melodies of the endless, restless ocean, mirroring at heart and root its elemental energies, insistencies, touch and untouchabilities, showing us how to commune with the rampant nature of our own freer flowing, fuller flowing inner and outer waters. If you don't know about Matthew Arnold, poet back in time, his most famous poem, at least for me, is Dover Beach. And I thought you might like to hear that as part of our program of things about the sea and other time, other perspectives. Dover Beach. The sea is calm tonight. The tide is full. The moon lies fair upon the straits. On the French coast the light gleams and is gone. The cliffs of England stand, glimmering and vast, out into the tranquil bay. Come to the window, sweet is the night air. Only from the long line of spray where the sea meets the moon-blanched land, listen, you hear the grating roar of pebbles which the waves draw back and fling. At their return up the high strand begin and cease and then again begin, with tremulous cadence slow, and bring the eternal note of sadness in. Sophocles long ago heard it on the Aegean, and it brought into his mind the turbid ebb and flow of human misery. We find also in the sound a thought, hearing it by this distant northern sea. The sea of faith was once too at the full, and round earth's shore lay like the folds of a bright girdle furled. But now I only hear its melancholy, long, withdrawing roar, retreating to the breath of the night wind, down the vast edges drear and naked shingles of the world. Ah, love, let us be true to one another, where the world, which seems to lie before us like a land of dreams, so various, so beautiful, so new, hath really neither joy, nor love, nor light, nor certitude, nor peace, nor help for pain. And we are here as on a darkling plain, swept with confused alarms of struggle and flight, where ignorant armies clash by night. Dover Beach. Let's see how you feel about this poem. This is Khalil Gibran. I actually, my searchings, I had no idea he'd written this. This poem, The Greater Sea. My soul and I went to the great sea to bathe, and when we reached the shore, we went about looking for a hidden and lonely place. But as we walked, we saw a man sitting on a gray rock, taking pinches of salt from a bag and throwing them into the sea. This is the pessimist, said my soul. Let us leave this place. We cannot bathe here. We walked on until we reached an inlet. There we saw, standing on a white rock, a man holding a bejeweled box from which he took sugar and threw it into the sea. And this is the optimist, said my soul, and he too must not see our naked bodies. Further on we walked, and on a beach we saw a man picking up dead fish and tenderly putting them back into the water. And we cannot bathe before him, said my soul. He is the humane philanthropist. And we passed on. Then we came where we saw a man tracing his shadow on the sand. Great waves came and erased it, but he went on tracing it again and again. He is the mystic, said my soul. Let us leave him. And we walked on till in a quiet cover we saw a man scooping up the foam and putting it into an alabaster bowl. He is the idealist, said my soul. Surely he must not see our nudity. And on we walked. Suddenly we heard a voice crying, This is the sea. This is the deep sea. This is the vast and mighty sea. And when we reached the voice, it was a man whose back was turned to the sea, and at his ear he held a shell, listening to its murmur. And my soul said, Let us pass on. He is the realist who turns his back on the whole he cannot grasp, and busies himself with a fragment. So we passed on, and in a weedy place among the rocks was a man with his head buried in the sand, and I said to my soul, We can bathe here, for he cannot see us. Nay, said my soul, for he is the most deadly of them all. He is the Puritan. Then a great sadness came over the face of my soul and into her voice. Let us go hence, she said, for there is no lonely hidden place where we can bathe. I would not have this wind lift my golden hair, or bear my white bosom in this air, or let the light disclose my sacred nakedness. Then we left that sea to seek the greater sea. The poet Harry Martinson is a poet I came across also for the first time, or at least the poet, not that poem, but this poet. And he has this poem called The Sea Wind. The sea wind sways on over the endless oceans, spreads its wings night and day, rises and sinks again over the desolate swaying floor of the immortal ocean. Now it is nearly morning, or it is nearly evening, and the ocean wind feels in its face the land wind. Clock boys toll morning and evening psalms. The smoke of a coal boat or the smoke of a tar-burning Phoenician ship fades away at the horizons. The lonely jellyfish, who has no history, rocks around with burning blue feet. It's nearly evening now, or morning. Well, those, in a way, called to mind this one of this poem that I had composed on the sensuality of the sea and what that feeling of that and that experience of that. And on Sea Point Beach in Kittery, another poem from Kittery, there was this mist that came in very heavy, and I just shed all my clothes. I was completely enveloped in the mist, and I went wading out into the water. And it was absolutely beautiful, and I just walked back in the mist and dried, holding my clothes as I walked. This poem came into me called Kissed. Every inch of my skin, kissed by ocean mist, breathing, lipping over my bared body, on a sea-salted shore, far from everywhere but here. right, we're coming in sort of the last stretch, we'll say, for now. So we've got a handful of things to wind out with a bit. A friend of mine I was talking with told her about this program. She said, I have to send you this this piece by the Russian poet Marina Svetayeva. She was one of the great Russian poets of the 20th century, along with Anna Akhmatova, who they were actually friends. If you don't know either one of them, might be interesting to dip in. And there was here's what she had to say in her essay, Poets with History and Poets Without History. The same water, a different wave. What matters is that it is a wave. What matters is that the wave will return. What matters is that it will always return different. What matters most of all, however different the returning wave, it will always return as a wave of the sea. What is a wave? Composition with muscle. The same goes for lyric poetry. The poem is a muscular and composed thing. It moves like a wave and dissolves literalizations. We participate in its flow. We flow in its participation. We give ourselves up to its rhythm, to the process of individuation, the process of merging. When Svetayeva compares the lyrical element of the waves to of the sea, I think of Out of the Cradle, Endlessly Rocking. I think of Wallace Stevens' seashore lyric, the idea of order at Key West, which leads to Elizabeth Bishop's The End of March, Mark Strand's The Idea, and Alan Grossman's The Woman on the Bridge over the Chicago River. I think of Heraclitus' idea expanded upon by Carl Jung that, quote, it is delight to souls to become wet. I love this quote, by the way. I'm speaking of Herman Melville earlier in Moby Dick. It's from Moby Dick. It is not down on any map. True places never are. He also said, yes, as everyone knows, meditation and water are wedded forever. Well, apropos of seafaring and sea crossings and voyagings, this was for a dear friend, Russell Volkmann, on his 60th birthday. But it's a spirit that could be for you too. So I'm going to give it to you on that wavelength. It's called Adventurer. A decade beckons, calls like the sea, calls to the mariner to set sail, to enter the deep, welcoming waters, calls to you, adventurer, to set a course for the next horizons of self, of life, for the great expanses awaiting your voyaging, for all the wild, uncharted territory now inviting your ready exploring. Here's an invitation of a kind, or certainly a context. Sort of feasting on the joys of the sea and the fruits of the sea. And so as we wind out shortly is Eduardo Galeano's piece, The Fiesta. The sun was gentle, the air clear, and the sky cloudless. Buried in the sand, the clay pots steamed. As they went from ocean to mouth, the shrimp passed through the hands of Fernando, master of ceremonies, who bathed them in a holy water of salt, onions, and garlic. There was good wine. Seated in a circle, we friends shared the wine and shrimp and the ocean that spread out free and luminous at our feet. As it took place, that happiness was already being remembered by our memory. It would never end, nor would we, for we are all mortal until the first kiss and the second glass, which is something everyone knows, no matter how small his or her knowledge. Eduardo Galeano. I say this for myself as a kind of not a mantra, but a something, calling to myself about it. But you may relate to it in literal or metaphorical ways. Stay salty is this poem. Stay briny. You roving, full-sailing, free-versing mariner, keep the sun on your shoulders, the bright blue sea at your feet, your face to the four winds, your chest swelling with sweet, salt air, the cork of your heart all afloat, bobbing with ease, with saline joy. The poet Basho. It's spring, all right. That hill we never named is hidden in the mist. The sea grows dark. The voices of wild ducks turn white. The poet Juan Ramon Jimenez, Oceans. I have a feeling that my boat has struck down there in the depths against a great thing, and nothing happens. Nothing. Silence. Waves. Nothing happens. Or has everything happened? And are we standing now, quietly, in the new life? Well, let's close with this, with an honoring and a reminding. It's called the waters. The ones that anoint you, body and soul, that fall from the heavens in the form of rain, soft and clear, that fall from the sun and moon in showers of pure light, that rise from your heart to your eyes as tears of joy, when great joy is there, or deep presence, or great sadness, that bathe you in their beauty, blue oceans to mirror-faced lakes, all the waters of life, aliveness that flow through your days, that will always find you, fill you, body and soul. Thank you again for listening in, floating and feeling in. Many thanks, too, to those who freely contribute to help support these programs and my poetic arts, invested as they are in nourishing spirits, uplifting hearts, and sparking greater awareness and aliveness. You can donate any amount by PayPal or Venmo or directly through my site or by regular mail to me at P.O. Box 1032, Westerly, Rhode Island, 02891. I also invite patrons to bring me their way for a month or longer this summer or fall as a private poet in residence on their property to create a new flight of work to share with and dedicate to them. As always, send along your comments, questions, suggestions. They're always welcome. Email Colin at thepoetorialist.com. Replays are online for you to revisit or share. You can also subscribe with ease to these broadcasts. Meanwhile, I hope you'll lean in next week or soon again. Until then, dear listeners, here's to musing on the essence and resonance of the sea of our planet Earth and the greater sea of life we're all voyaging through. And as always, good spirits.